Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast on the Her Hoop Stats Podcast Network. I'm Crina Mustafa alongside Calvin Wetzel, and it is finally the 2024 WNBA season. If you're listening to this right now, opening night is tonight. But before we get into all of that, we're going to do the last of our season previews, get into the last three teams being the Seattle Storm, the Indiana Fever, and the Phoenix Mercury. We're also going to talk Asia's signature shoe and give you games to watch this week. But Cal, we're like pretty much here. Are you ready?
By the time people are listening to this, we're going to be just a few hours from tip of the official WNBA season. It's so back. I'm so ready.
We are so back. And what a way to announce that we're back than getting the thing that we have all been hoping for, talking about, and that is none other than Miss Asia Wilson getting that signature shoe with Nike. For our YouTube watchers, I'm going to pull up this graphic. She shows up to her homecoming preseason game in South Carolina wearing, of course, I have a shoe.com, which is just an iconic way to announce that. And this is from Nike themselves on the website. When you go to, of course, I have a shoe.com, they say, you thought we'd sleep on an SEC champion, national champion, number one draft pick, five-time All-Star, U.S. Olympic gold winner, WNBA Finals MVP, a statue having New York Times bestseller, Time 100 Most Influential People in 2024, two-time WNBA champion, two-time Defensive Player of the Year, two-time WNBA MVP, and pettiest hooper on the internet. You thought, of course, Asia's got a shoe. A1 arriving 2025. It's the first time I read that out loud. I'd say that went pretty well. Didn't mess up. One take wonder. But what do you think of this rollout? Because I feel like there's so many different ways to kind of come at it, but just like your initial reaction when you saw that was announced.
They nailed it. Everything about it. Obviously, the hoodie, the fact that she got to do it at South Carolina, in the homecoming preseason game, the fact that they alluded to like not only her whole list of accomplishments, which you read perfectly in one take, like you said, also just the fact that, like, if we're being honest, they kind of have been sleeping on her, and now they're not anymore. It almost felt like they were admitting it, which I think was appropriate because it's
Yeah.
it's been overdue, and I feel like Nike knows that. And so now we're here. Now it's here. But I think everything about the way that they dropped the news in the announcement was spot on. Exactly what it deserved.
It was very intentional. Like a lot of the reporting mentioned that this had kind of been in the works for over a year now. And Dawn Staley was the one that actually got to tell Asia that she was going to get a signature shoe in February of 2023, which is like so poetic, of course, with her history, being coached by Dawn and being a champion at South Carolina. And so it all came full circle to that homecoming game in the preseason where the Aces pretty much pummeled Puerto Rico, in case you care about the actual result of the game in the preseason. But yeah, no, long time coming. Nike account was being super petty, like replying to all these people with the of course I have a shoe.com link to like tweets from like a year ago, 6 months ago, which like to your point, like, yeah, okay, that means you've been very, very aware of what's going on, but like don't get it twisted. This was very intentional. Asia knew exactly what she was doing with like when she chose to announce this. And so we're excited. It's coming in 2025. You best know Cal and I will be getting a pair of A1s. Very excited to see what they look like. I don't know if I haven't seen any like mock like designs of like what it looks like yet. I don't know, maybe I missed that, but I'm excited to see what it looks like.
I haven't either. I can't wait to see. I will say I don't want to say I don't care what it looks like because I do, but I'm gonna buy it no matter what it looks like.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
already have made up my mind. It's just the easiest purchasing decision of my life. But
Mm-hmm.
I have no doubt that they are going to put. I mean, that's why these things take time. That's why she found out in February 2023 and announced it in May of 2024, and the shoe comes out in 2025 because they don't just
Mm-hmm.
throw something together. The design and the collaboration on all the different features really takes time. So I'm sure that it is going to look dope, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, for sure. So congratulations to Asia, being also I think it was like the first Black WNBA player to get a signature shoe since Candace Parker in like 2012 or whatever year it was. So another since Candace Parker stat to add to the resume there. But yeah, congratulations to Asia. Finally gets her shoe, the A1. Nike used their apostrophe, their like check mark as her apostrophe on her name. It was all really well done. So yeah, congratulations. All right, let's get into our first of the last of the season previews. We'll start with the Seattle Storm being one of the teams that played in the Canada game just last week. I'm lost complete track of time. I was about to say 2 weeks ago because it feels like 2 weeks ago, but it really only was a week ago. But they still, as we're recording, there's like 15 minutes left on Monday for teams to kind of finalize those last roster cuts. So if they make a cut, we recorded it before it, but they pretty much only have like probably like maybe one cut to make when looking at this roster. They did have a trade, which I'll pull up for our YouTube watchers, but the Washington Mystics acquired Jade Melbourne from the Seattle Storm in exchange for their 2025 third round pick. And Jade Melbourne did make that opening day Washington Mystics roster, along with, I know we're not previewing the Mystics, but Dee Dee Richards did make that opening day roster for the Mystics. And we talked about her when we did our preview for the Mystics. Make sure you check that episode out. So just want to say, yay, she made the roster. Very happy about that. But trading Jade Melbourne kind of freed up some space for Seattle to not have to make that cut, and they got kind of that pick in return. Cal, obviously we're going to find out eventually, but like looking at this roster, who do you think gets cut based on like what you think is going to happen? Maybe wrong. We don't know what they'll end up doing, but just from your perspective, and then we'll come back to it and see if you were right.
The interesting thing about the timing of us recording this is that we can probably see if I'm right by the time we finish this episode, because the deadline,
True.
like you said, is 15 minutes from now. And I think we'll still be recording on one of our other teams we're previewing. But right now I'm looking at, like you said, they saved a little bit of money with that trade, but they still have to cut one more player in order to get under the cap. When you look at the players who just basketball-wise could potentially get cut, Kiana Williams and Dulcie Finkham-Mengiadu are pretty safe by virtue of, even if they cut one of them, they still wouldn't quite be under the cap. With Dulcie, they'd be $600 short. That's how close it is.
Oh, wow.
But in order to actually get under the cap, they have to cut one of the other three, Nika Mule, Victoria Vivians, Joyner Holmes. Technically, the math would work for Jordan Horston, but I think Horston's pretty safe. Victoria Vivians started their preseason games, so she sort of feels safe to me as well. It feels like Noel kind of likes her, which feels to me like it's coming down to Nika versus Joyner Holmes. I lean that Nika would probably beat out Joyner, but I really don't know. We'll find out by the end of this pod if I was right or not. But if I had to guess, I think Joyner Holmes is going to be the one on the short end of this. By virtue of like the math and then just kind of the rotations that we've seen in the preseason.
Yeah, it's tough too because it's felt like Nika has been kind of a lock since the moment that Seattle drafted her. So like I do see that for sure. Also, Seattle could just give that extra $600 to me. You know, if they're that much, I'll take it. I'll take it, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. You'll work it out. But yeah, no, we'll see what happens. Let's talk about them in the preseason. They went 1-1. They didn't win the Canada game, although it was pretty close. The leads kind of went back and forth for a while there before the Sparks ran away with it. And then the Storm ended up winning their second preseason game. Where would you kind of rank them heading into the season?
I have them pretty solidly third right now, behind obviously the Aces and the Liberty. And I do think they're ahead of the Sun, although I could see the Sun starting out better just because anytime you have a new team, and we saw this with the Liberty last year, a team with all sorts of new pieces, however good they may be, it still takes time to gel and time for that chemistry to develop. But I do think that they're pretty solidly a top three team. And those pieces, they're all veteran pieces, so they all know, how to make it work, but they all still have a lot of basketball left in the tank as well. It's a big four. It's not a big three, but the big three are, well, two of those big three are the new ones that they brought in, NECA and Skylar. So I wouldn't be too worried about like any chemistry issues that early, but I do think they'll be playing better at the end of the season, just once they get like more reps under their belt. I love, though, those pieces together. I think they all work together perfectly in terms of the skill sets that they bring to the table. It's the puzzle pieces concept that you talked about several weeks ago with South Carolina. It's the same thing, I think, when you look at the different things that each one does for you on a basketball court. In particular, I love Ezzy Magbagor next to those other three, because Ezzy, I think, is the ideal player to have next to three scorers. And all three of those other players we know can put the ball in the basket. And Ezzy can do everything else you need on a basketball court and doesn't need the ball in her hands all the time. So I love this fit. I think it's going to work great. And it might take a little bit of time, but this team is going to be really, really tough by the time we get to maybe the All-Star break, if not sooner.
It's funny because after getting to talk to Skylar a couple of times, she hates being called a veteran because she thinks that that ages her. So when you said that she's got a lot left in the tank, she very much believes that. She's made that very clear. And also, I guess, like, she kind of mentioned this too, she doesn't totally feel like a veteran on this team because, like you said, she is a new addition. So there is that kind of level of still, like, you're still new, you're still learning, like, a different system than what you're used to, different staff, different players. And so she's a vet, but also she wants to be known as like a somewhat of a rookie on a new team. So yeah, I think it's a perfect like range of, you have people who have been there before, you have Jewel who's been with Seattle forever, and she kind of knows, she's kind of stepped into that leadership role too. And so, and then you have these like young players too. We talked about Jordan Horston, how she might look now in her second year. We talked about, like, you know, being on that Seattle team when they weren't really as good, but she was able to get heavy minutes. She was able to get that playing experience, and now to actually have the pieces for this Seattle team to potentially be really, really good this season. Like you said, third, fourth in the standings, maybe depending on how things go. But I feel like that range really benefits them. For, like you said, like, I just love coming back to that puzzle piece thing because it's so true of like all good basketball teams, and it's just like fun to figure out and kind of see them figure that out as the season kind of goes. But last thing on Seattle, what expectations should we kind of have for this team? You know, thinking about all the things that we both just mentioned.
I hate to break it to Skylar, but she is a veteran. She has a lot of basketball left in the tank, but there are like 27-year-olds who people talk about as veterans. So Skylar's a
It's all
veteran, but
relative. Yeah, it's all
it's
relative,
all
you know?
relative. I love the mindset though, and I love the mindset of being a rookie on this team because it's true. She's
Yeah.
learning, and she obviously was not in the league last year. So it's gonna take some time. But to me, like, just what to expect out of this team. Well, one thing that I think that benefits them, I talked about the chemistry and stuff, maybe trying to figure it out early, but their early schedule actually isn't that hard. They don't, in the first basically month of the season, they don't have the Aces, they don't have the Sun. They have one game against the Liberty. That's really it against that tier that they're in, those other top four teams. They get the Mystics in the Sky in three of their first 7 games, who are both more in rebuilding mode. So I think they're going to have every opportunity to kind of tinker with stuff, figure it out, like really come into the season and Noel Quinn kind of figure out what works and how this team is going to gel together. So I don't expect necessarily this team to actually have a ton of like growing pains on paper because of that. But I do think that this team is going to be really, really fun. And you're going to see Skylar, who is a veteran, but also I think she's going to be great because she has so many weapons around her to facilitate. And we already saw this in the preseason. We saw her finding NECA for three and like hitting ahead on the fast break and so many different things that I think she's gonna have a blast on this team. And Jewel, I'm so happy for Jewel to be able to not have to shoulder this ginormous load like she was last year to
Yeah.
to have some help, you know. So
To
this
weather
team
the storm?
yes, yeah. Well, she did weather the storm last year. She had
Yeah.
a year off of really having all stars around her. She had one last year at Ezzy, but in terms of the offensive end, I think in particular, now it's going to be this team's going to be extremely tough to guard.
For sure. Yeah, there you go. Seattle Storm, very, very excited to see. Their vibes are like so high, by the way. Just being around them, I could tell. Noel's excited to coach this team. This team's excited to play together. So, really excited to see how Seattle does, especially, in that first little bit of the season, like you said, with the schedule that they have. So, keep an eye out for them. But next, let's move on to the Indiana Fever. All right, so the Fever are one of the teams that we're talking about today where we do know their final roster heading into opening day at the very least. They have a special situation. They will start with 13 on their roster because Zamiris Dantas will be suspended to start the season for coming over late. The whole prioritization, kerfuffle, whatever. She had a bunch of personal stuff come over, so that's why she came over late. We'll see what happens when she's no longer suspended and they do have to eventually make a cut. But as of right now, they're going into their first matchup with 13 on the roster. Of course, 12 will be playing. But there are a couple of things that I wanted to talk about in terms of Indiana, stuff that happened in the preseason. The first being, and I should have, thinking back on this, I probably should have downloaded the video so that I could play it, but I didn't think that far ahead. And what I want to talk about was this clip from Coach Christy Sides saying that basically they're going to try to break some of Caitlin's college habits. So she in the clip specifically, she was talking about her shot selection. As we know, CC's shot selection can be kind of crazy, kind of nuts sometimes. That's part of what CC is as a player. That's part of what makes her her. And this video kind of sparked a whole debate online because Coach kind of talked about her saying that maybe she needs to start taking these like long twos instead of like shooting from where she does. And it's all about decision making. And she's like been asking Caitlin to make decisions in like 0.5 seconds in like practice and things like that. And people are either like, yeah, this is good, or people are like, no, why are we trying to break her habits? Like, she's good. I don't want her to start taking long twos. So I'm curious, Cal, like, where do you kind of stand on the video, having like watched what Coach said, and like, what's your thoughts on this whole thing?
Well, I can't wait to hear what you have to think because when we were texting about this, you told me you were going to keep me in suspense. But I'll go first. This is the very rare case, I think, where I kind of lean towards the opposite of the analytics side of this because I know obviously the analytics is layups and threes, don't take long twos, blah, blah, blah. And that's usually where I'm at because as a numbers person and all of that. But I do kind of like what Christy Side said. I don't really have a problem with it because I think, first off, the quick decision making, that's very real, obviously. That's something
Yeah.
that you really have to get down if you're going to be a point guard at the highest level possible in the best league in the world. But specifically when it comes to the long twos, like, no, I don't think Caitlin should take shots with her foot on the line or whatever. I don't think anyone should. But when you're talking about more realistic mid range, like 15-footer, free throw line, that kind of thing, I think if you're going to be a superstar in this league, you do need to have that in your bag because good defenses are going to bait you into that. They're going to run you off the 3-point line. They're going to have rim protectors waiting for you at the hoop. And so you got to be able to hit that little shot in between. And Caitlin took a handful of those in college, but obviously that wasn't really her main staple of her offense. And I think if she is going to be an MVP level player, which I know some people think she's going to be right away. She's not. I don't believe that at all. But at some point in her career, when she hits her prime, maybe. But if she's going to get to that point ever, she's going to have to be able to hit that shot. And I don't think everyone should be trying to take those shots. I don't think the seventh best player on your team should be coming in and just launching all sorts of mid-range twos. But analytically, I don't even think it's bad for your superstars to be taking those. Asia Wilson, best player in the league, elite from the mid-range. When you look at like RBK, Jewel Lloyd, like the best scorers hit those. Your role players don't hit those, and that's okay. But no one expects Caitlin to be a role player in this league. So if she's going to reach the level that she expects of herself and that everyone else expects of her, she's going to have to hit those. So no, I don't have a problem with it. I actually like the quote, and I love Christy Sides trying to coach her up a little bit. I don't think she's trying to like take away anything that made her so magical in college. I think she's just trying to refine it a little bit.
Yeah, I think where I'm at is like, I think the phrasing of what she said just sounds really controversial. That's why people are just like getting really upset. So I think that's where I'm at is like, it's not that she's trying to like completely break whatever Caitlin was doing in college. No, like you drafted her for a reason. Like she's as players have their certain tendencies in the way that they play. That's what makes them them. Like that's what makes Caitlin. But like you said, like I think with the decision making, that is something that so many rookies that have come into the league have talked about, where it's like everything is so much faster. Like you have to make those decisions, especially the people that are at the point guard position where players who have the ball in their hands a lot of the time and have to make those quick decisions, because everybody loves to talk about Caitlin's playmaking skills as well as her like shot making skills. Yeah, that means her decision making is going to have to be even faster and even smarter. So I think where I'm at is like, yes, I think it's fine to just like not be the player that just like, she's not going to like go and chuck up the three from half court or from the logo or whatever every single possession. Like that's not what's going to happen. And I think that's part of the discussion around like what they've been trying to work on in the preseason, because it's going to be a wake up call. Like I know people get so offended when we say that, when the rookies are going to have a wake up call when they get to the league. It's just like, it's true. Like you're leveling up to another level of professional ballers, and it's just a different, like we've seen a lot of players struggle too. Like if you want to make that comparison to Sabrina Ionescu, that is a player that struggled a lot when she started playing in the W, when it came to like seeing the type of defensive pressure that was coming at her when she would take the ball up the floor. And like she wasn't really used to that point guard stuff. Like Sabrina would much rather play in that two spot, in the shooting guard spot. But you're going to have to realize at some point that you need to adjust your game. And so I think I kind of look at it from that standpoint, where like she'll have trouble. Like defense in the W is no joke. And so it's okay to start training a little bit different to kind of adjust to that, because the league's going to force you to do that. So I didn't think it was controversial. I think it was just the phrasing a little of it was a little bit maybe like came off a little bit more harsh than it intended to be. So people are going to get mad like they always do at things. But I think that's kind of where I'm at on it, Kel.
Yeah, people are going to get mad about everything, especially when it has to do with Caitlin. So I get it. And yeah, obviously the phrasing makes it sound like maybe you're trying to make some sort of extreme overhauls to her game, which I don't think is true. But like you said, like Sabrina's one example. Kelsey Plum and Jackie Young weren't anything like what they are now when they first came in the league. Obviously, Jackie Young, her reforming her shot has a lot to do with that. But like Chelsea Gray, another one, you could just look at the whole Aces backcourt. Like Chelsea Gray was not anything close to an all-star when she first came into the league, and now she's the best point guard in the game. So I just specifically guards, I think everyone, but especially guards, when you have to make those reads in those 0.5 second decisions at the next level, it's so much harder. It is way, way harder because all the help and everything that you're facing is just so much faster. And so it's just going to happen. It's going to take some time. She's going to turn the ball over sometimes. She's going to miss some shots. But this is what you have to do if you want to get her to be the type of player that she can be at some point in her career.
Absolutely. The rest of this roster. So we talked about Caitlin. We have I kind of put the young core together. Aaliyah Boston being drafted last year, and Alyssa the year before, and then you have kind of like your vets, which is like the Kelsey Mitchells, the Katie Lou's, the Erica Wheelers. We also have a couple of players who are continued or kind of in the middle of that, where like you have like, well, Grace is still young, but I would put her in kind of the same category as like Lexi Hull, being as kind of like that middle tier. They're not like the top draft picks, but they're still like young pieces that you have on this team. What does this Fever team kind of look like to you basketball wise as we kind of head into their first week?
It's going to be really fun. They're going to push the ball more, I think, because that's what we saw in the preseason, and that should be a shock to no one when you draft Caitlin Clark. And also, they scored the least in transition out of any team in the league last year, so they have nowhere to go but up in that regard. They're going to be pretty balanced, I think. I don't think this is going to be a team that is dominated by Caitlin Clark or by any one person. I think she's going to have her nights. Kelsey Mitchell's going to have her nights. Leah Boston's going to have her nights. Melissa Smith's going to have her nights. You're going to have some nights when someone else randomly steps up too. Some of those players you mentioned, Lexi Hull, Grace Berger, Katie Lou Samuelson, probably have some night where she goes 6 for 8 from 3 and scores 20 points. It's going to be
wait for those.
Exactly. It's going to happen. At least once it's going to happen this year. And this is going to be one of those teams where opposing defenses are not going to be able, no one's going to be able to guard them like they guarded Iowa, obviously. you're not going to be able to sell out on anyone, I don't think, which is going to be really fun because they're going to have so many different options. So I'm excited for that. And even aside from those last three top draft picks that they had, Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark, #1 picks, and Alyssa was #2 the year before that. But they got some other young pieces as well. Celeste Taylor, of course, and you mentioned
Yeah.
Grace Berger and Lexi Hull. So they have some youth on the bench who could really develop and have potential. See what they can do. I think this team is going to be fun, and they have a wide range of outcomes. I think because there's so many players like that who have a high ceiling, but we don't necessarily know for sure how quick they're going to develop. But it's definitely going to be a tough team to guard.
Yeah, for sure. And shout out to Celeste for making that roster too. I think that's an exciting fit as well. Really excited to see what the Fever look like this season. And they've got a bunch of games on TV, so we're going to be able to watch and see how they do. They also had their first charter flight of the season, I saw, which is a whole other dilemma because this charter flight program, they're phasing it in. They are clearly phasing it in because not everybody had that. But maybe that's a discussion for another day so we don't go too far in a tangent. But the Indiana Fever, really exciting to see what they look like this season. All right, we're here. The last team to preview of our season preview series episodes on Coast to Coast. Let's go Phoenix Mercury. We talked about the Sparks last week. Make sure you check that out in case you haven't. Oh, a bit of Sparks news. They waived Monique Billings today before we even get into the Fever. That's one where we talked about last week. We kind of thought she would be a lock. Ended up not being a lock, but the Sparks have like 4 more players to cut now, I would say. Actually depends. I don't even know how much that freed up cutting Mo, but the Phoenix Mercury cut 7 players this week from their roster. When I got that email, my jaw dropped. And I'm recovering from wisdom tooth surgery. So you can imagine that I did not want to drop my jaw. But it was like all of their guards pretty much, almost like all of their backup guards they cut, including 2 of their draft picks, Charisma Osborne and Jazz Shelley. And then, of course, also Air Hearn, who they picked up from Athletes Unlimited, who did well this year. I need to know your thoughts, Cal, on this gigantic number of people cut from their training camp and like what they might do after this, because we still don't know by the time we're recording.
I'm not really sure I understand these, but I'm also not in practice and training camp every day, so who knows? I think what you said is pretty true that they don't have a whole lot of backup true guards at this point, and it also feels like to me that they don't really have a lot of true bigs either. It feels like this roster is like a freaking Buffalo Wild Wings. It's just like wings, wings, wings. Well, it's just wings. Nothing but wings. They're like Beck Allen at the 4, who's a wing, like this team full of wings. Obviously, when BG's healthy, which we'll talk
Oh
about a
my
little
god.
bit.
I had no idea you were going to say that. That threw me completely off guard. Just like the Mercury. Off guards.
Maybe
They don't cut their guards.
I like that.
Oh,
I like that.
he's
Maybe
going,
I should put my notes in like the shared doc so you're prepared. I just
he's
dropped that
going
in on you.
off the rails. Oh my god.
I don't know what this team, especially BG, who we saw on a boot, saw on a scooter. Where I know we're going to talk about that. Without her, that's even less that you have in the way of bigs. They did sign Liz Dixon after cutting like half their team. Then they signed Liz Dixon to come back. So I don't know. It feels like a weird roster makeup. I'm not sure if I love the puzzle pieces. I love some of these players individually. It just feels a little bit different than the Storm in terms of their fit together. But we'll
Yeah.
see. Like they could make it work. I do love a lot of the talent that they have on the wing. I think they have some dogs on the wing, and so this team, they're definitely going to have their nights too. But it's hard for me to exactly figure out the direction that they're going right now. And some of these cuts, I thought they had potential. Charisma Osborne in particular, I was kind of bummed and surprised to see her not make the cut.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking of backup guards, Veronica Burton was waived by the Dallas Wings. Speaking of wings too, I guess, the Dallas Wings. She was waived as well too, which like I guess it was kind of coming to maybe her time was up with them. Does Phoenix go after her now? Do they have space? Like you said, BG seems to be injured, and the only reason we know that is because of that video that she was in with like Cameron Brink or whoever it was, in a boot and on a scooter. Which you know who was in a boot and on a scooter last year? Chelsea Gray. And so I really wonder what is wrong with BG. I don't know if anyone's asked yet. I don't know. Phoenix hasn't said anything. Like I haven't seen any kind of like timeline or like what's going on. They've been posting content with her, but like nothing about this like potential injury. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe I'll have to reach out to another PR by again this week to see what's going on. But other than that, what are you kind of looking for with the people who have gotten to this team who are new? So like Ka, Tash, Beck, like you said, like they have talent on the wing side for sure. But what are you kind of looking for to see like how they kind of mesh going into this first like little bit of the season?
Well, first off, real quick, in order to sign someone like Veronica Burton, if my
Mm.
math is correct, I do think they would have to make one more cut to get under cap, which could happen. It is 5:10 Eastern now, so if that were to happen, that would have happened by now. But I
Yeah.
haven't checked Twitter since I hopped on with you, so who knows?
I'll
In
hop on
terms
while
of
you're talking.
yeah, yeah, go find it, and I'll answer your other question. uh,
Okay.
yeah, in terms of the new players, like I said, dogs. I think they got some dogs, and I think defensively, it is going to be a nightmare to go up against Kalia Copper, Natasha Cloud, Beck Allen. I think Beck Allen could switch on to anybody. She can play the four like we've seen. It's not natural for her, but on this roster, I think she's going to have to. So I think they're going to be a real tough team to go up against defensively, and especially when BG is back, which hopefully is sooner than it looks. The boot, honestly, on a side tangent, doesn't worry me as much as the scooter, because sometimes a boot can kind of be precautionary, but usually you're still
Yeah.
walking in the boot. The scooter is what makes me think there's something going on here. But hopefully they
Hmm.
get her back, because I think she is probably the most important player on this team, just in terms of what the rest of the roster looks like and what she brings. So aside from that, though, this team it's got dogs. It's got dogs and it's got wings. I'm just not sure if I know yet how they're gonna fit, but
Uh,
we'll find out.
so I did find some news. I went scrolling through my email inbox. It's not Phoenix news, but it's Seattle news, which you so cleverly predicted that we would find out by the end of the episode. And guess what, Cal? You were right. The
Is
Seattle
it Joyner?
Storm waived Joyner Holmes. With that, they have their opening day roster, in which I think I see Nika's name on here.
Yeah, if they waive
Yes,
Joyner, they
it's
got to
here.
keep
Yeah.
Nika. They
I
didn't
was
need to
like,
cut two.
she was at the top, so my eyes just scrolled past. But no, she's on the roster. She's on the roster.
Shout out to
But
Nika.
there you go. Shout out Nika to making that roster. There isn't really. I'm looking through my thing here. Yeah, no, there isn't really anything else from Phoenix. They posted some shirts on their socials, but who knows what's gonna happen. But yeah, no, I think those are all very good points. Yeah, we'll see what happens if there's a BG update. Sparks also just announced their final roster. Shall we go through it?
Why
Let's
not? Let's do
see. We're like live now. This is exciting. Although everybody would have known by the time this is out.
it.
Let's see.
It's still fun.
Los Angeles Sparks announced the final roster for the 2024 WNBA season. Da, 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 da. Let's see if I can. Oh, also, there was a little bit of Sparks news today that Julie Almond has opted out of the 2024 WNBA season due to personal reasons, which is now a full season suspension due to injury, which I think she picked up overseas. So the final roster for the Sparks is Zaya Cook, Rakia Jackson, Lexi Brown, Derica Hamby, Stephanie Talbot, Kia Nurse, Ray Burrell, Ari McDonald, Cam Brink, Azrae Stevens, Leja Clarendon, Lee, and I'm Yaru. If I pronounced that correctly, I have the pronunciation right in front of me, so I got no excuse. But yeah, that's the final team. I don't have the roster in front of me, but I assume they made more cuts that we will get back to at another time. But that's the end of the cuts, I guess, for us today until we get some Phoenix news. But is there anything else on the Phoenix Mercury that you would like to touch on before we head into our games to watch for this week?
I don't think so. I think this is just one of the teams that I'm the least sure about. I really don't know if they're going to be great or if they're going to be one of those teams on the 8-9 cut line of making the playoffs at the end of the season. I honestly
Yeah.
have a hard time figuring this team out. That's all I
Yeah,
got.
I think I'm with you. I think some of the decisions and kind of who they have has made it a little bit harder to predict than some of these other teams, like Seattle, for example, who we talked about. So it'll be interesting to see how they actually mesh once everybody is healthy and once we get an update on BG as well. Because, like you said, like even though they cut a lot of their guards, they also don't really have a lot of bigs. So we'll see what happens with this team. I'm still excited. I'm always excited to see every single team, especially the beginning of a season, the excitement, like you just can't compare that. And like I know everybody loves, and I have this take in tennis too. Everybody loves the big finals. Like if you want to talk WNBA finals, if you want to talk like a tennis like Grand Slam final, but to me, like the beginning of stuff is so much more exciting than the end result, unless like your team is like in the final, because it's just like there's so many different possibilities in tennis. There's so many matches at the beginning of a tournament that you could just watch it all the time. The beginning of the WNBA season, these teams, you have no idea how things are going to shake out. It's all about experimenting with lineups, and to me, that's so exciting. I feel like I'm like freshly motivated. We haven't had like basketball really since like March Madness. So like we've had preseason basketball, but like it's not the same. So I'm very excited. And with that, let's get into our games to watch this week, which I feel like we haven't properly done in such a long time. And we'll start with Tuesday, May 14th. So when you're listening to this podcast with opening night, we have Liberty versus Mystics at 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific. That will be on ESPN 3 and WNBA League Pass, followed by Fever versus Sun at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN 2 and ESPN Plus. And this game, Fever versus Sun, will also be available for Canadian viewers on TSN 5 up here in Canada. I made sure to scour all the TV guides so that I can find which ones are also in Canada. TSN will be broadcasting pretty much all the W games this season. And by that, I mean the ones that are being broadcasted will be on TSN and not on Sportsnet, because in the past they would like share. But that one will be on TSN 5. And then we have our two late games at 10 o'clock Eastern: Mercury versus Aces, Lynx versus Storm. We talked about the Mercury. We talked about the Storm. We talked about the Fever. All these teams can be found in the opening night of games. And then we got a busy week of basketball. We got 2 games on Wednesday: Sky versus Wings, Dream versus Sparks. Thursday, we've got one matchup. That's Liberty versus Fever on Prime Video. And on Prime Video will be available both the States and in Canada. We can watch it on Prime Video up here as well, too. Then 2 games on Friday for our WNBA on Ion nights, as well as League Pass: Mystics versus Sun and Storm versus Lynx. For the full schedule, for the weekend's games and recaps, make sure you're followed and subscribed to Her Hoops Stats, the podcast network, our website, our newsletter. Make sure you're subbed to our YouTube so you can catch Coast to Coast on YouTube and get these wonderful graphics like this opening day graphic that I
Yes,
just
I was
put
gonna
up.
say, please go to YouTube and watch this thing that Crina made with the flashing like borders because it looks cool. And also, we really need to figure out the StreamYard thing to like make it stay on the screen because you had to
I
hit that
know.
button like 17 times and it kept coming back. And I feel bad that you have to keep doing that. So we'll figure it
It's
out
okay.
someday. But
It's okay.
it looks
Maybe
amazing.
maybe if I get that $600 from the Storm, then I can
Well, they
get
cut
the
Joyner. It's too
resources
late.
to.
It's too
Oh yeah,
late.
that's right. That's right. It's too late. But it's okay. It is what it is. I'm okay with pressing it 17 times. But yeah, Cal, we got a big week of basketball coming up. So are you excited?
So excited. I'm so with you that the beginning of stuff is almost more exciting than the end because
Right?
there's so much more going on. Like championship games are fun, but it's like one game. The
Yeah.
beginning of the season or the beginning of the March Madness tournament or the beginning of whatever your tennis tournament, anything in sports, there's so much happening. You can't even keep up with it all and it's overwhelming, but in such an amazing way. So I can't
Yeah.
wait for that to start off this week.
Speaking of new things, before we get out of here, Cal, you got a new little project coming up, which I'm just gonna drop this on you now. Would you like to promote your new podcast?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I have a podcast coming out. Actually, I think it'll also be out the same day that you all are listening to this on Tuesday. with Jim Turvey, Danny Barlavi, and Mary Liebig. We're going to be covering betting all things women's sports. So we're going to start out with the WNBA, but we're going to get into tennis, hockey, soccer, volleyball, all of it. And we're going to have some fun guests. I'm sure we'll have you on at some point to cover some tennis because you know more about tennis than I think any of us do. We know your expertise on that front. And we're just going to have a good time covering the whole spectrum of women's sports.
So there you go. After you listen to Coast today, make sure you go listen to Cal's new podcast. So make sure you're following him at Wetzel31 to make sure you get all those updates. You can follow myself at Crina MM. And like I said, make sure you're subbed and following to her Hoop Stats. And we will see you next week.